I found my wife cheating with her boss, and now he's claiming half our $1.2 million house in a bitter court fight over who owns the $300, $0 inheritance I never knew she secretly siphoned off. This betrayal has destroyed everything. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Lisa, turned out to be a lying, cheating bitch. Honestly, I thought we had a good thing going. We'd been married for 8 years, built a nice life, and I always believed she was loyal. But then, out of nowhere, everything started to fall apart, and I found out she had been lying to me for years, cheating on me with her boss, Mark, and secretly siphoning off a chunk of our money. That's the shocking part. I never knew about the inheritance she took 300 she kept hidden, and I only found out after everything blew up. It started with small signs, little things I brushed off at first. She'd be more distant, cancel plans suddenly, and get defensive when I asked her about her phone. Lisa's always been a little bitchy when she's caught off guard, but I never thought much of it. I'd ask her about her late nights, and she'd say she was working late or out with friends, even though I'd see her phone light up with messages from Mark, stuff that was just too obvious. Still, I wanted to believe her. I kept telling myself she'd never cheat. But deep down, I felt something was wrong. Then one day I decided to check her phone. I know, it's not exactly noble, but I was desperate. I'd been noticing her hiding her texts more often, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. I found a string of messages between her and Mark, talking about meetings, keeping things discreet, and how they couldn't keep their hands off each other. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The messages were explicit, talking about sex, their plans to meet up, and how they'd keep it secret from everyone. It was all right there, plain as day. I didn't even have to think twice. I printed out everything and waited for her to come home that evening. When she did, I confronted her. I showed her the messages and asked her straight up what the hell was going on. Her face turned white and she started lying right away. "It's not what you think," she said, voice high-pitched and defensive. "He's just a boss, a client. We're just friends. You're overreacting." She kept insisting that I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. But I knew better. I'd seen enough to know this wasn't about work. It was about her sneaking around, having sex with her boss, Mark. Her reaction was infuriating. She called me jealous, insecure, told me I was crazy for even doubting her. She spun some bullshit about how she was stressed, about how I was always working and not paying enough attention to her. But I wasn't buying it, not anymore. I could see through her lies. She was a manipulative bitch trying to cover her tracks. I felt betrayed, by her obviously, but also by myself for not noticing sooner. How could I have been so blind? How did I miss all the signs? I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and a strange sense of numbness taking over. That night I couldn't sleep. All I kept thinking about was her lying, her cheating, the secret money she'd taken 300 she'd siphoned from somewhere and hidden from me. I had no idea she was capable of that level of betrayal. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything she'd stolen from us, from me. And that's when I started to realize that my life was crumbling, that I'd been living a lie, and that I had to figure out what to do next. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it. Not without some kind of reckoning. After confronting Lisa that night, everything changed. She kept up her act, throwing out tears and fake apologies, insisting she'd been stressed and that Mark was just a bad influence. She said she'd stop seeing him, promised it was a mistake, and begged me to forgive her. Honestly, I wanted to believe her. I loved her, or at least I thought I did. But deep down, I knew better. I'd seen the messages, felt the betrayal, and I wasn't going to just sweep this under the rug. The next few days were a blur. I started digging into her phone, her emails, her bank accounts. That's when I found out about the inheritance. It didn't make sense at first. How could she have siphoned off $300, $0 without me knowing? Turns out, she'd been secretly transferring money into accounts she'd set up under fake names. She'd been doing this for years, little by little. I was stunned. I'd always thought we were solid, that our finances were transparent, but she'd been hiding a whole secret life, and she'd managed to steal a fortune without me catching on. I began to realize that her lies weren't just about the affair, they extended deep into our financial life. I started to see the pattern. She'd always been manipulative, controlling, and she knew exactly how to hide her tracks. I remember feeling a strange mix of shock, rage, and helplessness. How could she do this? How could she betray me, cheat with her boss, and then steal from us all at once? It was almost too much to process. I could feel my blood boiling every time I thought about her lying, about her sneaking around behind my back. I decided I needed to confront her again, but this time with a plan. I wanted to get to the bottom of everything. I needed proof, and I needed her to admit everything. So I set up a recording on my phone and pressed record when she came home. I wanted her to slip up, to say something incriminating. And sure enough, she did. She started to get defensive, saying she only cheated because I was never around, that I was too busy working and never paid attention to her. She claimed Mark was just a friend, that she never meant for it to go this far, but I knew her better. I knew she was lying again. The way she looked at me, the way she avoided my eyes, it was all so transparent. That recording became my insurance. I also started gathering every piece of evidence I could find, screenshots, bank statements, emails. I wasn't going to let her spin her way out of this. I had to be prepared for whatever came next. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. Her lies, her manipulations, they'd been eating away at me, and I was finally starting to see her for what she really was, a selfish, deceitful woman who destroyed everything we built together. Meanwhile, Mark kept texting her, trying to deny everything, claiming they only had a professional relationship. But I knew better. I knew from the beginning that they'd been having sex, and I had the proof. I'd also learned that Lisa had been planning this for a long time, covering her tracks, siphoning money, and cheating behind my back. It all felt like a punch in the stomach. How could I have missed all the signs? How did she manage to keep this secret for so long? The worst part was realizing that her lies weren't just about the affair. They extended into our finances, our trust, everything. That $300, $0 she'd stolen. It was gone, hidden in accounts I didn't even know about. I felt like I'd been living in a nightmare. What's worse, she kept insisting she loved me, that she was sorry. But I knew that sorry didn't undo the damage. I was furious, shattered, and I couldn't see a way forward without feeling like I'd been completely betrayed. I started to think about what I had to do to reclaim my life, to protect what little was left of it. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I couldn't focus on anything else. All I could see were her lies, her face lying to me, trying to spin her way out of what she'd done. I was angry, so damn angry, to think she'd been secretly siphoning off money, making a whole secret life behind my back. It wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It felt like she'd stolen my future, my trust, everything I'd worked for. I started to realize that this wasn't just about her cheating. It was about her stealing from us, from me, and then lying her ass off to cover it all up. I called a lawyer the very next day, knowing I needed legal advice. I explained everything, her affair, the secret accounts, the inheritance she'd hidden. I had to figure out what rights I had, especially since I'd just uncovered that she'd been secretly siphoning off money for years. Turns out, she'd managed to hide a good portion of our assets, and I was just discovering the tip of the iceberg. I also learned that she'd been claiming the house as hers, our house, worth about $1.2 million, though she insisted it was joint. But I had proof that she'd been secretly transferring money and even buying property under her own name using the stolen inheritance. I felt a cold fury building inside me. That's when I decided I needed to confront her again, but this time with a clear plan. I told her I was taking control of the situation, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of it. I told her I knew everything, about Mark, about the inheritance, about her secret accounts. She tried to deny everything, but her words sounded hollow. I showed her the evidence I'd gathered, screenshots, bank statements, the recordings. Her face twisted, and she started crying, but I didn't buy it. I knew her tears were just another lie. She kept insisting she loved me, that she was sorry, that it was just a mistake. She begged me to forgive her to work things out, but I was done listening to her bullshit. I told her I wanted a divorce, that I was done being played for a fool. I also told her I was going to fight for the house, the inheritance, and the money she'd stolen. She yelled, called me a control freak, accused me of ruining her life. I told her she'd ruined her own life with her lies and her betrayal. That moment felt like the turning point. I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of this anymore. In the days that followed, I started to prepare for the legal battle. I hired a forensic accountant to trace the stolen money and confirm how much she'd taken. I also contacted a real estate lawyer about the house. The house was worth over $1 million, and I knew she'd been trying to claim it was joint, but I had proof that she'd been secretly transferring her own money into accounts that I didn't control. I wasn't going to let her keep what she'd stolen, and I definitely wasn't going to let her keep the house. That was my home, my investment, everything I'd worked for. Meanwhile, she kept trying to manipulate me, calling me names, accusing me of being paranoid, controlling, jealous. She tried to turn the situation around, making it seem like I was the bad guy, but I saw through her. I knew her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal. I was done being naive. I realized that her bitchy attitude, her constant lying, and her affair with Mark weren't just about sex. They were about control, money, and deception. She played me for years, and I was finally waking up to the reality that I had to fight to get my life back. I wasn't going to let her get away with it, no matter what. As I moved forward with the legal process, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and anger. Relief because I finally had a plan to fight back, to get what was rightfully mine, and anger because I was still haunted by the betrayal. Every time I looked at the documents, the evidence, I saw her face, her lies, her manipulations. It was like she'd been plotting this whole time, sneaking around, siphoning money, and then trying to pretend everything was fine. The first court hearing was intense. She showed up with her lawyer, trying to spin her version of events, claiming she loved me, that her affair with Mark was just a mistake. She never meant to happen. She insisted she had the right to half the house because we'd been married for so long, even though I had proof she'd been secretly transferring her own money into accounts under her name, not ours. I felt my blood boil during the hearing. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning. I presented my evidence, screenshots, bank statements, the recordings, and explained how she'd been hiding assets for years. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that she was entitled to her fair share, that the house was joint, and that her affair was irrelevant. But I knew better. I had the proof that she'd been lying about her finances, about her relationship with Mark, and about the inheritance. I told the judge about the $300, $0 she'd siphoned off, about the secret accounts, and how she'd been planning this for years. I could see the judge was skeptical of her lies, and I felt a small glimmer of hope that I might actually win this fight. Meanwhile, Mark was involved in his own mess. He was trying to deny everything, claiming he had no idea she was married, that he was just her boss, and they never crossed the line. But I'd uncovered enough evidence to prove otherwise. I had texts of them planning secret meetings, explicit messages, and bank transfers that linked him to her stolen inheritance. It was clear they'd been having sex, probably for years, and he'd been complicit in her financial schemes. I wanted to make sure he paid for his part in this. The court proceedings dragged on for weeks, each session revealing more of her lies and manipulations. I felt like I was fighting not just for the house or the money, but for my sanity. The betrayal cut so deep, and I couldn't shake the feeling of having been played for a fool. I'd trusted her, loved her, built a life with her. And she'd turned out to be someone I barely recognized, greedy, manipulative, and willing to destroy everything for her own gain. One of the most shocking moments came when I learned she'd been planning to leave me. She'd been talking about divorce for months, secretly preparing for her new life with Mark, all while pretending to be the loving wife. I found emails where she discussed moving out, splitting the assets, and even planning her new life. It was like discovering a second betrayal. She'd been lying to my face all along while secretly plotting her escape. That realization hit me hard. I'd been so blinded by her lies, I hadn't seen her true intentions until it was almost too late. Through it all, I stayed focused. I knew I had the truth on my side, and I knew I had to fight to protect what was left of my life. I was determined to get justice, to make her accountable for everything she'd done. I also started thinking about how I'd rebuild myself afterward. The house, the inheritance, the betrayal, they all left scars, but I knew I had to move forward. I couldn't let her win, not after everything. I just wanted to get this over with and finally start healing, even if it meant facing some very harsh truths about the woman I'd once loved. The court date finally arrived, and I remember feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and resolve. I knew Lisa would come prepared with her lies, her manipulations, her tears, but I also had everything on my side: proof, evidence, the truth. I sat there in the courtroom, staring at her as she tried to look innocent, like she hadn't been scheming behind my back. Her lawyer was doing her best to spin her version of events, claiming she was just a victim of circumstance, that she loved me and only made a mistake. I wanted to laugh. It was all so predictable. When it was my turn to speak, I laid out everything I'd uncovered. I showed the judge the bank statements, the emails, the recordings. I explained how Lisa had been secretly siphoning off our inheritance, hiding assets, and planning her escape with Mark for years. I told the court about the $300, $0 she'd stolen, how she'd been lying to me the whole time. I could see her trying to interrupt, trying to deny everything, but I kept going. I was sick of her lies. I was done pretending. The judge listened carefully, and I could tell he was taking everything seriously. He looked at her with a skeptical eye, and I saw her face flicker with panic. When the judge finally made his ruling, it was a blow. She was ordered to give me full ownership of the house, and she was required to repay the stolen inheritance plus interest. The judge also ordered her to pay my legal fees. I felt a strange sense of relief, like a huge weight had been lifted. For the first time in months, I saw a light at the end of the tunnel, but the victory was bittersweet. I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. She immediately started arguing, claiming she was entitled to half the house because we'd been married so long. She tried to appeal, to drag things out. Mark, meanwhile, was still trying to deny everything, but I had proof linking him directly to her financial crimes. I was ready for whatever came next, knowing the battle wasn't over yet. This was just the beginning of the end for her. What really hit me hard was realizing how much her betrayal had cost me, not just financially, but emotionally. I'd lost my sense of trust, my peace of mind, and the woman I thought I knew. Every day, I'd wake up feeling like I'd been sucker punched. But with the court's decision, I felt a flicker of hope. I could finally start to rebuild. I could finally take back control of my life. I knew Lisa would just walk away quietly, but I was prepared for the fight. I had the truth, and I was determined to see it through. Now I'm left trying to pick up the pieces. The house is mine again, though the damage is done. I've been in therapy, trying to process everything, and I've started to focus on my own future. I still get angry sometimes, remembering her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal. But I also realize I'm stronger than I thought. I've learned that trust can be broken in an instant, but that doesn't mean I have to stay broken. I've got a long road ahead, but at least now I know what I'm fighting for. And I know I'll come out of this someday, maybe even better than before. Looking back, I never thought I'd be the guy who got betrayed so badly, who watched his life unravel because of lies, greed, and betrayal. But here I am, having fought tooth and nail to reclaim what was stolen from me. The house, my inheritance, my trust, everything she tried to hide and manipulate away. It's been a brutal journey, filled with anger, disbelief, and moments of hopelessness. But it's also taught me something invaluable. I'm stronger than I thought, and I won't let betrayal define me. The whole experience has changed how I see relationships. I used to believe in fairy tale endings, in the idea that trust was unconditional. Now I know that trust has to be earned every day, and sometimes it's better to be cautious. Lisa's lies opened my eyes to how easy it is for someone to hide their true self behind a pretty smile and manipulative words. I've learned that money can corrupt, and that greed can turn someone into a completely different person. I've also realized that revenge isn't just about getting even. It's about reclaiming your dignity and standing up for yourself. I could have let her walk all over me, but I chose to fight. I refused to be another victim of her lies. The court victory, the evidence I gathered, it's a reminder that truth, no matter how painful, will always come out in the end. And even if it doesn't fix everything overnight, it's enough to start rebuilding from scratch. Now, I'm focused on moving forward. I've started therapy to deal with the emotional fallout and to understand how I let myself get. So, I've also been rebuilding my financial security, making sure I have control over my own money again. I've learned to trust my instincts more, to listen to that little voice that warns me when something's off. Most importantly, I've come to accept that some betrayals cut so deep that you'll never forget, but you can learn to live with the pain and still find happiness. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I'll never let anyone manipulate me like that again. I've been shattered, but I've also been remade, stronger, more cautious, and more aware. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: don't ignore the red flags. Trust is fragile, and when it's broken, it's hard to fix. But it's possible to come out on the other side, even if it takes everything you've got. Stand up, fight for what's yours, and never let anyone take away your dignity. Because at the end of the day, the only person who truly controls your life is you. And I'm finally taking back that control.